everybody. This is going to be chapter 24 of America's Story 2, and it's titled, What Time Is It Anyway? For centuries, people told time by the sun. This wasn't always the best way to know what time it is, and as America got industrialized and people got busier, they needed a better way to tell time. Sundial. Sundials are an ancient way to tell time. Before clocks made it possible to standardize time, determining the time based on the sun was the best known way for centuries. Have you ever considered the concept of time? When I was a lot younger, the author, not me, I used to think that a week was such a long time. I became quite ill when I was 7 years old and had to spend a week in the hospital. That 1 week seemed like it was about a year long. For a long while after that, I couldn't understand that all weeks are the same length. But who decides the time? Who made time? Genesis gives us a detailed account of the creation of the planet we live upon. God made evening and he made morning, and he called it a day. So God made time. But did he make clocks? Did he tell humans how to keep track of time? Well, in a way he did. He gave us the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night. In Bible times, people used sundials to help tell time. A sundial was a gadget that told time by casting a shadow from the light of the sun. In a way, it was a crude form of a clock. But how accurate could one of these sundials actually be? For the person standing right next to it, it was pretty accurate. But for the person that was 5 miles away, it wasn't. In the earlier days of our country, being on time was not something of great importance. If someone was 15 minutes past the time of an appointment or church service, they were not considered late. To be late, you had to get there a day later. Time was almost a relative thing in those days. In our fast-paced and sometimes hectic world, this might seem extremely strange to us. But in early America, clocks were not as common as they are now. More than any man-made timepiece, the sun was the most common used clock. As we learned in our exercise, the world is always turning on its axis as it moves around the sun, so the angle of the sun's rays and its very location in the sky is always changing in relation to the earth. The people living farther east experience the sunrise and the sunset before the western population. So how could there be a true standard time? As America changed and grew, this time issue became a surprising problem. Two trains that need to run on the same rail, but in opposite directions, had to know exactly what time to leave. If they were off even by a few minutes, well, the result could be disastrous. The westbound train could leave one town at exactly 11:30 a.m., according to the town's clock. At the same time, the other eastbound train would leave the other town farther west. That town's clock might say 11:27 a.m. Who was right? Which town clock was correct? And the word for the day is time zone. An area that has the same standardized time. Time zone. This ridiculous and irritating situation caused many problems, as you can imagine. The railroads tried to solve the problem by making what they called a time indicator. The time indicator was an extremely complicated chart of sorts, showing the times of certain towns and cities in comparison to a major city, which was shown prominently in the center. Look at the illustration above. As you can see, this time indicator tells the time of cities across our nation. But isn't it confusing? Comically, people from different cities and towns were very loyal to their own town's time. Each thought theirs was the right time. Nobody knew what time it was anymore. This may seem ridiculous to us because we all have cell phones and computers that automatically set the tip correctly, so we don't have to wonder what time it is in a neighboring town. Finally, a man named William Friedrich Allen came up with the idea of time zones. Mr. Allen had been a train engineer and was very familiar with the problems caused by all the different times. The time zones, he suggested, would run in belts, hundreds of miles wide, up and down through our country. Everyone inside each of these time zones would be at the same time. This makes sense to us because this is how our time zones are still set up today. Not everyone was happy about the solution, though. Remember, people were loyal to their time. Some people thought the railroads were trying to take the place of God. But most people could see that time zones were a logical solution. People all over the country prepared for the big moment, and on October 18, 1883, the time zone plan was put into action. Finally, everyone knew what time it was, and being punctual was possible. As much as some people dug their heels in and bellyached about it, they had to admit that it sure made their lives easier. Indeed, as schedules ran more smoothly and the convenience of a standard time became more and more evident, people forgot about being outraged. The sun at its zenith was no longer the most popular clock, but it was still there with its comforting warmth and light. Why do you think so many people were angered about the time zones and a standard time? Do you think that they really thought the railroad was trying to take the place of God? Or do you think that just maybe it was more about their pride of being right? Perhaps even they just found change hard. I'm sure it was a little bit of all three. So, American time zones. This map shows all the time zones in the United States. What time zone are you in? We are in, dun dun dun, Alaskan time zone. But it's nice seeing all the different comparisons. It's interesting. Good to keep track of, especially if you're trying to get hold of someone else that lives in a different part of the country. Telling time through history. This is a modern sundial in Australia, but ancient civilizations, including Egypt, Babylon, and Rome, used them. Candle clocks served as a great way to tell time when the sun was not out. They were marked to show how long they had been burning. Hourglasses are also ancient, measured time by how long it took for the sand to empty from the top of the device. Ancient civilizations also used water clocks. One type measured time by how long it took a bowl to sink in another bowl of water. One of the oldest watches still preserved, this German one dates back to 1530. This elephant clock is a reproduction of an elaborate water clock designed in the 13th century in the Middle East. Wrist watches were considered women's watches until World War I, but they were more practical than pocket watches and soon became the most common watch for both men and women. Pendulum clocks were invented in the 1600s and for centuries were the most reliable and accurate way to tell time. Digital clocks are popular now and can even appear on other items like stoves and microwaves. We learned in our chapter that in earlier time periods of our country, time didn't hold that much importance. Knowing the exact time was not crucial to everyday life. Can you imagine this? Just imagine that your family is going to fly in an airplane to somewhere far away, and on your ticket the departure time is 11-ish o'clock a.m. Or maybe it only shows the date on which you'll be departing, with no other indication when on that day you are leaving. For most of us who keep a full schedule, this would be a nightmare. I think you will agree with me that the invention of time zones and the observance of precise times has changed life here in America. So, that is the end of this chapter. Don't forget to do your assignments in your workbook. And there will be other resources down in the descriptions below, so be sure to check those later.